What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 20 of Destination Talk. I'm John Paz.
And I am Harry, and we come to you today from Chop Studios located at 750 Route 34 in Matawan, New Jersey. Thank you to today's show sponsor, the Academy in Garwood. To schedule a free class, text them at 908-540-6936. Today's guest is someone who brings intensity, passion, and purpose into every arena he steps into, from the wrestling mat to the coaching room to the boardroom and beyond. Joining us today is Mike DeMarco, a standout wrestler and respected coach at Rutgers University. In this episode, we will talk about Mike's journey through the highs and lows of competitive wrestling, what it really means to lead young athletes, and how he built a brand rooted in motivation and mindset, and the advice he gives anyone striving to be their best on and off the mat. So whether you are an athlete, a coach, or someone chasing a higher purpose, you are going to want to hear this one. Mike, welcome to Destination Talk. Thank you for coming in today. How's everything going?
Great. Appreciate you guys having me.
No, we appreciate you coming in today and joining us. So, let's just start. Kind of give us a little bit of a background on yourself, and tell us a little bit more about who you are.
So lifelong wrestler. I was born onto the mat. My dad wrestled in college, so I don't even know when I started wrestling. But we'll get into a little bit more of my story. But essentially, that's how I got connected with John. Wrestling led me to Rutgers as a student athlete for 5 years, and my career quickly transitioned into strength and conditioning coaching. And then, after starting my business, came back to Rutgers, and that's when John came in as a student athlete.
Right.
So those timelines aligned really well. I left Rutgers in 2022, and now I'm out into the open ocean, still coaching, and not doing strength and conditioning coaching anymore either. So there's been a lot of evolution along the way with just the way I've been coaching. But I opened with lifelong wrestler. I guess I'm a lifelong coach now, and intend to be for the rest of my life. So
That sounds great.
yeah.
Before our episode started, can you talk a little about, your middle school, going into high school, that story you're kind of just telling us?
Yeah. I don't know if you could tell on camera, but I'm not a big person. Growing up my whole life, I was always smaller than everybody else. I have very vivid memories of middle school and high school. Just, if my friends, if I was 12 years old, my friends looked like 12 years old, and I still looked like I was 7 and 8 years old. And that theme carried all the way through to this day. I'm sure people look at me and can't believe I'm actually 35 years old, right? I have always been a lot younger looking and also physically mature. Like my maturity and my development was way behind. And, 8th grade year, I think the lightest weight in New Jersey at that time was like 75 pounds or 77 pounds or something like that. And I was 60 pounds soaking wet. Freshman year of high school, lightest weight class at the time was 103 pounds. I was 76 pounds. And the story we were talking about before the show was, freshman year of high school, I walk in and I'm ready to rock, and met some resistance from coaches at that time just because, and for honest reasons, like they felt that it was a liability for me to wrestle 103 pounds with the size I was at. And I remember it as my dad having to sign a waiver to basically say, like, we're good. If he gets hurt, like we signed off on that. So let me wrestle. I wound up wrestling varsity that year at 75 pounds. My sophomore year of high school, I was only 85 pounds, still at 103, right? So I was always, at least in my head, like I was always fighting just to get to par with everybody else. I was always behind. And now in these latter years of my life, at that time, you don't really have that stuff cognitively going on in your head. You're just interacting with the world. And now looking back, I'm like, wow, a lot of that life experience drove the way I perceived myself as I continue to grow up, right? And I think the last 10, 15 years, I've really worked hard to work through those stories that were developed from those younger experiences in my life, and has ultimately led to me having a tremendous amount of empathy for the people I work with, and just understanding how to help them navigate their feelings of being behind, whether it's performance-wise as an athlete or weight on the scale as just a general population person running around living life. But yeah, that was my wrestling story, and the same theme followed me to Rutgers. When I stepped on campus at Rutgers, I wasn't really supposed to be there. I was truly a Division III recruit. Had the opportunity to walk on at Rutgers, and I remember my first year was Goody's first year, and we were at junior duels. I think it was in Oklahoma or something like that. And Goody got called for the interview, and we were in the same hotel, and he knew that I had just committed, I guess you would call it, right, to go there. But I was wrestling 112 at junior duels the summer going into Rutgers, right? And Goody gets a call for the head coaching job. And I can only imagine he's like, I got a 112 pounder coming in as in my first recruiting class, or not even his first recruiting class, you know? But him and I, that was like our first interaction with each other. And I bring that up because 3 months later, it's September, and you know how hydration test goes at the college level. Typically guys are waiting until the last second, right, to get their weight down. It was like the first week of school. He's calling me out of my dorm. He's like, drink 3 bottles of water, come in, take the test. Like, let's get your name off the list. I did hydration test that year at like 115 pounds. And in college, the lightest weight's 125. Yeah. Also throw into this situation, I was 17 years old until November of my freshman year at college, right? So I just share all of this stuff because these were all parts of my life experience that led to me always feeling like I was behind. And I always had to work through that in my head. I think in all other aspects of life, not just in wrestling. But wrestling was the arena that allowed me to like experience that and put my hands on it and at least feel like I had control over those feelings.
How did you overcome that challenge, being you giving up a lot of weight at times? So like as a competitor, how were you able to overcome that challenge? Before college, so I didn't start strength training until I was in college. Before college, to answer your question, I would relentlessly run. And I had this loop. I grew up in Lyndhurst. It's a square mile town, and I had a 1 mile out, 1 mile back loop. And I would run that loop 3 to 5 times a week, even if I wasn't doing it for weight cutting purposes. And in my head, that was the thing that was giving me the edge to catch up to the other guys. After getting a degree in exercise science, I quickly learned that was probably not the best option at that time. But psychologically, it gave me my edge. I believed in that thing giving me my edge, whether it was the right physical stimulus or not. Right, that was giving me my mental edge for years. And then when I got to college and I started to play around with strength training, that was like a whole new thing for me where I really leaned into that. We had a strength coach my freshman year from Rutgers, and by my second year, I was introduced to Zach Evanesh, and that was like I was off to the races and down a rabbit hole with Zach.
Yeah. So you kind of just touched on it. Wrestling is such a mentally demanding sport. How do you train your mind, as much as your body to be able to wrestle and kind of get through life like that?
It's a great question. I think to this day, the way that I did that when I was still a competitor, I still do the same as just like a normal, average, regular person living life. And I would not hide from what was going on between my ears, especially as a competitor. Like when I would run those loops, I wouldn't listen to music. Like I was present with whatever was going on in my head. And the same thing was true in college. I would be really present with those thoughts and do something with them. And eventually that led to me journaling and using that as a tool, right? There's various tools, but journaling. And then at some point in college, started to really lean into talking about it out loud. I remember dealing with a lot of anxiety. I learned about that in college, like what anxiety was. I didn't really know that that's what I was dealing with until I got to college. And my freshman year, everybody, like I was 4 deep at 125 because I was the smallest, and everyone either quit or got hurt, and I was the starter, right? And so here Goody was 7 months later with his 112 pounder from junior duels as his starting 125 pounder.
Yeah.
And I was quickly thrown in, and I wound up starting for 4 years. But with that like quick transition came a lot of anxiety, like my first 2 years at Rutgers, because it was overwhelming.
Right.
And with the help of Goody and Leo they really got me to be open-minded to talk to a sports psychologist that we had at school. And that was very, very helpful. And this is years before, this is like, we're talking 2008, 2009. So we're not really in like the whole mental health, it's okay to talk about world.
It's not normal the way it is now.
No. It was like, you were like not telling anybody that you were doing that,
Right.
but it was so helpful. And there's a lot of things that I learned just talking to this doctor for my time at Rutgers. One of them, to be specific, Leo would bust my chops because the doc actually helped me find a tool that worked for me. And every time I walked into practice, I had a specific spot in the room. And he taught me that the doc taught me it was a dark spot, right? And I found that dark spot. And the same thing was true for any arena we went to. The first thing that I had to do when I walked into any arena was find this dark spot. There was no writing on it. It was just a blank dark spot. And I would spend maybe 2 minutes when in these new environments, just attaching that dark spot to a mechanism where whenever I would make eye contact with that, I was taking a deep breath and releasing whatever it was that was kind of like chaining me down. And I bring up Leo because in the practice room, I had the same spot. And when practice would get hard and we were doing crazy stuff at the end of practice and I was still trying to push, whether we were jumping rope or whatever we were doing between monkey roll goes, here I am staring off at this spot, right? And you would think I was a space cadet, but I was actually, to answer your question, I was like actively doing something. Right. And so Leo, you know how Leo was, like he would get on me like, here he is again, looking like a space cadet, but I wasn't spacing out. I was engaging with a tool and a mechanism at that time. And to this day, like I believe in that stuff. And so I continue to search and find tools and mechanisms that help me today.
Would that be the equivalent of like a grounding effect?
Totally. Yeah, grounding effect. I've also heard Wrestling Mindset talks about it as you have like a focal point. Right. So they teach it like that. So very similar kind of mechanism.
Can you talk about your competitive years at Rutgers?
Sure. I shared freshman year. I didn't really have a choice. I was thrown into it. I think my freshman year, I was like, I got thrown into the lineup in January and
right in time for a Big Ten season.
That's right. Well, we were EIWA at the time,
okay.
So it was still tough schools, right? We had Navy, we had American was really good at that time. They were ranked like top 10 during those years. And you had Lehigh and Cornell and again, I was a D3 wrestler, so to me that was like being in the Big Ten, right? Yeah. But yeah, I got thrown in. I was probably like 3-12 my freshman year, and I believe all 3 were forfeits. We could fact check that, but I'm almost positive I was 3-12 with 3 forfeits. Tremendous experience, right? But that was also the first time where I think I originally made my choice to go to Rutgers because I said, why not? Like, if I have an opportunity to wrestle D1, why not just do it? But then when the time came to actually do it, I was like, do it.
Right.
It's here. Yeah.
And it took like that first year to realize, oh, like you can do this. Like you can hang with these guys. You're wrestling well in the practice room. And so I started to lean into that. And, I started to progress. And by the time we reached January of that freshman year, I was 120 pounds. So
you're getting closer.
Closer, but I'm wrestling 21-year-old men that are coming down from 45. And so sophomore year, for all the right reasons, got recruited over. Goody recruited Joey Langle, who was a state champ coming in from Howell Township. And my high school teammate, the prior year, Matt Fusco, who was like 3rd in the state coming in. And Vinny Delafov came in. So Goody quickly brought in 3 125, 133 recruits. And I'm sure most people would get mad about that, but I wasn't. I was like, I'm not even really supposed to be here anyway. Right. So I think that kind of like mindset helped me because, again, I just spent the last 17 years of my life being behind anyway. So it wasn't like a new thing for me to navigate. It almost was like it was normal for me to be behind, right? That first year I got thrown in, there was no one ahead of me anymore. It's like that was not normal. I was never used to that.
Right.
And so when these 3 guys came in, I was like, oh, okay, I know what this is. Like, time to go to work. And that was really my mindset for like the thick of my career in that middle.
So after, competing at Rutgers, you become the strength coach at Rutgers. Can you talk a little bit about how you got into that and, that journey in the beginning at least?
So when I originally went to Rutgers, I had my head set on being a physical therapist. And at Rutgers, the path for that is exercise science, apply to PT school because that's all your prereqs, and then you basically do a 4+3. During my degree, I quickly realized, I placed into intermediate algebra out of high school.
I was like that too.
So in order for me to get the prereqs, I had to go through calc and stat and in order to take the chems and all that, I had to get through so I had 4 semesters of math. So here we are again academically behind, right? But I was like, there's no way I'm not getting this degree. And so I made it happen. And by the time I got to my senior year, PT school is super competitive, 3.8 and above if you want to hang. I was probably a 3.4, 3.5, which is still good. But at the same time, I also started to really fall in love with the exercise science lab because that was very heavy in my degree program. And it was really cool my junior and senior year when at 10 a.m. I would be in the lab with the VO2 mask on and my classmates pricking me for my lactate threshold. And then 2 hours later, I'm going to wrestling practice and I'm like, oh, am I reaching lactate threshold at 45 minutes in, So that wasn't helpful at that time, but that experience right there changed the trajectory, and I started to second guess whether or not I really wanted to go to PT school. And so towards the tail end of my college career academically, I took my final internship in a non-PT setting just to assure, and that setting was with Brian Blue, who was Frankie Egger's strength coach at the time, and he was coming up to work with us. And so I was going down the Toms River and I was like, I'm doing this. This is exactly what I want to do. And quick context for Rutgers wrestling from the years of 2007 to 2012, we had a different strength coach every year for 5 years. And we had a different strength coach from the school every year for 5 years. But then we also had Zach Evanesh, who was the consistent guy in the background. And we wouldn't even go to the school strength coach. We would do the school lift because we had to. And then a group of us was driving to the original underground next to Apollon and really lifting. Yeah. And we did that for the last 2.5, 3 years of my college career. But anyways, because there was so much of that, and to answer Harry's question from the beginning, strength training was the thing that gave me my edge in the latter half. I saw the opportunity, or at least in my head, I had a vision where I was like, I'm a Rutgers wrestler getting an exercise science degree at Rutgers. There's an opportunity for me to be the first Rutgers wrestler strength coach for Rutgers wrestling and give them stability and consistency. And so that was the vision I had in my head as I was a student. And that opportunity came to fruition my senior year, got hurt, and pretty much career-ending injury. And I remember within 2 weeks of the national tournament, I was running lifts for our team. And so I was the volunteer strength coach for 2013 season. And I went from student athlete to volunteer coach in that. Imagine the national tournament ends and then 3 weeks later, you and your teammates who you were just partying with are now reporting to you and you're responsible for them. So that was kind of weird, but that's how quickly it happened.
Right.
And I jumped right in, and it was I was just soaking up everything that Zach was teaching us all that time. I still have my notebook that I would go to Zach's with, and I would write down every single workout, and I would consume every one of his, he would put so much content out, and I would just study everything. And so my first year out, 2013, I was a volunteer, and then quickly learned you need CSCS because I didn't have it. They would give a football guy to come supervise. And then I was I also need to make money. And there's a lot of other elements of that story, but I wound up opening a gym that same year. So I left Rutgers and went on this business owner gym path from 2014 until 2018 when I went back to Rutgers. Somewhere in 14 to 18, was like, all right, I need a W-2 to get married and buy a house. And I also want to fulfill this dream that I had. So I finally sat for CSCS 4 years after graduating, got it, went back to Rutgers, and then did a 4-year stint there.
Mm-hmm.
I know for me personally, I've been in training athletes now for 15 years, I think it's it. And so I know who I am today is certainly not what I was 15 years ago. So in your training world, how has it evolved for you over that time?
Oh man, so much.
Yeah,
Like-
I was just saying, because I look back, I looked at one of the videos that I did with John, and I'm thinking about, wow, like we really did that, like compared to what I'm doing today with some of my athletes, it's very different.
Yeah, you know, I was actually thinking about this on my ride in because I know I've listened to some of your guys' episodes, and obviously a lot of my relationship with John is through the lens of training. And I remember early on just being so fixated on the technical exercise selection. My program's better than your program. Why would you ever do that program? That's where my head was for probably 60% of my coaching career. Let's call it 14 to 19, really. Mm-hmm. And in 2019, the first full year I was at Rutgers, had the honor of like being part of Nick Suriano and Anthony's journeys to a national championship. And that year was an inflection point for me as a coach, because I got to experience two guys achieving the mountaintop two totally different ways.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, everything you thought matters doesn't really matter, like to the extent that you think it matters. And from that point forward, my brain flipped into this mode of like, I could care less what the hell you do. You think Pilates helps you and gives you your edge? I'm going to help you be the best Pilates person in the world. You think Westside helps you and gives you great. Like let's make sure like we still stay robust and whatever. But I really flipped into this mode of trying to understand what makes the individual tick and then helping them optimize that thing. So if, just pulling in the examples of Nick and Anthony loved Zach and was very like shared that similar thought process with us in terms of training, and Ant trained like that the whole year, like right up until the national tournament. Nick was not that at all. Like you would not get him to be consistently like in a Zach workout and stuff like that. But he knew he trained in such a different way that worked for him. And he knew when he needed certain elements of training. He knew he was so in tune with his body that like he didn't really need the structure and like the regiment because he owned it. Like, and not to say that one way is good or bad, but early on in my strength or my coaching career, like that kind of more single track minded would have did Nick a disservice, and probably kind of did at certain times, right? Because I'm like, this guy's not coming to our team lift. Like, what's his problem? It's like he doesn't really need it. Like that's not what's giving him his edge right now.
No, it's funny you say that, because that's kind of how I think it's been for me also. Like I was just the road went one way, and I didn't realize that it was two ways, or it had some turns, or it stopped or twisted. And I think when I finally opened myself up to just say, okay, this works for this person, this works for that person, and that's when I saw my training evolve, and then the results of my athletes followed along with that. It's interesting. You're not alone in that way.
Well, as a coach, it's also, at least for me, I imagine it's freeing when you come to that. When you get to that part of the journey, it's almost freeing where you're like, wait, I don't have to train every person in the world. And I can have a person walk in my door and realize over time, I'm like, I love you. I wish I could work with you, but I'm not the right person for you. That's such a freeing position to be in as a coach. But when you're not in that position, you feel like, oh my gosh, how am I going to train every person that's in the state of New Jersey? Like,
well, I think also too, when you're first starting out, you say yes to almost everything,
right?
Because you are trying to establish who you are. And then, like you said, you get to that point where you can start backing off, or maybe you have others who you've worked with and they can work with them. And It's very interesting to hear you say that, because it's kind of how my evolution has gone as a trainer.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice to hear that someone else experienced that.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is the biggest lesson you've learned from transitioning from athlete to coach entrepreneur?
Wow, that's deep. I feel like I can answer that so many ways. That the boring things are always gonna win.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the same thing with wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I tried to overcomplicate it, and Goody would say it all the time, right? Like, do the little things right.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing goes as a dad, as a business owner, literally, like, show up and do the boring things. There's so many flashy things in the world that say, oh, come to this camp, do this new technique. Like, the boring, consistent things that go unrecognized are what actually get you recognized.
Mm-hmm.
So he turned me on. I have to say, I'm on your email list. So I get your emails when they come out now, and I am reading them. So can you kind of talk to us a little bit about why you started that journey with doing that and what you're hoping to attain from that?
I appreciate you signing in.
Not a problem. Hey, he told me, so you know.
I was like, this is right up your alley, Harry.
I should get you a referral fee. Yeah. So, man, that was really like a creative project for me. I owned a gym for 11 years and went through peaks and valleys of consistently creating content and messaging. And I never, in that time frame, I never actually sat down and just kind of like got my brain out on paper in a way where I have somewhat of like an SOP formal document of the way my mindset is. And I shut the gym down February 2024. So leading up to the launch of that newsletter, I was coming up on 1 year of that anniversary. And the year after shutting the gym down was like internally a crazy year, because you were this person for 11 years. You built this identity and this brand and all this stuff. And one day you just said, no, not me, going in this new direction. And so last year felt really similar to like the first couple of years after not wrestling for the first time in 20 years. There's a huge identity crisis that goes on for, I don't care what sport you play. You navigate that when your time comes to an end. And the same thing happened for me when I shut the gym down. It happened again. And so for the past, from all of 2024, I spent that year navigating that similar spot of postgraduate. I'm not I can't, when someone says, what do you do? And you're like, you can't say that anymore. Like, you can't say you're a gym owner anymore. And so I navigated that, and coming up on that 1 year anniversary, I saw that opportunity as like, you have a blank whiteboard right now. You shut that thing down to move in a new direction, in a direction you believe in, an evolution of all of that life experience that led to this opportunity to move in this new direction. So do it right this time. Like the first time around when I graduated Rutgers, it was kind of just, I don't know, the jet stream was flowing that way. I jumped in, I said, here we go. And we just start going with the thing. Like I had a moment in time in my life to sit back and say, no, I'm going to script out how this thing's going to go going forward. And so I made a commitment to myself in 2025 to create 365 pieces of content, various forms, whatever. And the newsletter, I had attempted to write email newsletters, I don't even know how many times after graduating from Rutgers. But this story in my head was always like, you don't know how to write. XPOS was like one of the hardest classes at Rutgers for me. I hated it. Like, I hate writing. I still hate writing. And so I always would tell I would try and do it. And I'm like, you're not a writer. Like, let somebody else do that. Right. And one of my college teammates, Chris Orzakowski, I think his branded name is like the email copywriter or something. He's such a good writer. And so I always admired his emails and just the simplicity of the way he wrote. And he would even try and help me, like during COVID and post-COVID. He would send me these courses that he would sell for hundreds of dollars. He would just be like, hey, take this ebook. Like, and I would start and I wouldn't do it. And I would start and I wouldn't do it. And so finally I was just like, just do it. Just start writing. Who cares if anyone reads it? And so the first phase of that 365 was every single day in January of 2025. I literally wrote an email every day, January 2025. And as the email series went, I was basically just allowing the nature of that process reveal the next email that I needed to write.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't sit back, and I think what held me up all the other times is like, I think I need this master plan of like, what are the chapters of your email? Like,
Right.
I had no idea. I knew the general direction, right?
Well, you were paralyzing yourself by thinking like that.
That's right.
Got to be spontaneous and see what's next.
Yeah,
every
and
day.
also just commit to it. And the same theme is true for many athletes.
Mm-hmm.
You
Right.
paralyze yourself because you know you need to get stronger, but then you get lost trying to find the best way to
Right.
get stronger. It's like,
Instead of just starting.
just start.
Right.
The same thing goes with people. Like, I don't work with athletes anymore. I work with general population people, right? And for them, they get paralyzed because that's even worse. Like, there's so much more information in general population world for getting started that they literally do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And my business now is I help people choose one thing to get started with, and then all of a sudden they start to feel momentum, and
The snowball effect.
yeah, it's almost it's not rocket science.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So, what is one piece of advice you wish you gave yourself when starting, your whole venture?
On the business front,
Yeah. Looking back at it now.
you have everything you need to be successful already.
Mm-hmm.
Your every experience that you had in school, as a student athlete, as a son, as a brother, all of that stuff equipped you to be successful in the thing that you want to do next.
Mm-hmm. On the flip side, can you do it from the athlete's perspective?
Yeah, so I want to answer that question through the lens of a major event.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to the national tournament for the first time. You have everything you need to be prepared for this exact moment. There's nothing left for you to do or buy or listen to or watch, or like, you literally have everything you need to get to this moment, or else you wouldn't be standing in this moment ready to step on the stage or the mat for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And that answer is like kind of me talking to myself, because I think that's where I get hung up the most, is like I do all that boring stuff to get to that moment. And then when I'm literally about to put my toe in the water, I'm like, I think I need to watch one more episode, or listen to one more podcast, or do one more strength training, or go for one more run.
Right.
Or it's like,
Yeah.
no, you don't. Like, if you did, like, you should have did it 30 days ago.
Right.
Yeah, last month.
So, burnout's quite common in athletes. Just in, you see you work with general population and everything. So, how would you help those people, athletes or general people today, kind of get around that?
Great. I love this topic. This is like wheelhouse for me now.
Right.
And just to tie back, you asked a few questions ago, how has your coaching evolved? It's evolved into this, like having these conversations with people.
Right.
Because now I could care less if Susie goes to F45 or Orange Theory or works out at her house. I want to help her take care of the things that are inhibiting her from going consistently. And if that's the mechanism that works, go for it. But to answer your question, I really like to operate or like think through frameworks, because it keeps things simple and like in a box for me. And one of those frameworks that we spend a lot of time working with people on, regardless of athlete, age, whatever, is something called the 5 freedoms. And the 5 freedoms came from an entrepreneurial coaching ecosystem, but they're time, relationships, purpose, health, and finance. And obviously within each of those categories, you can have multiple subcategories. But the 5 freedoms ties into burnout, because when you're an athlete, you're laser focused on many parts of like health, right? But what you don't realize as an athlete is that you might not have the same financial stressors as a 45-year-old businessman, but you still have financial stress. Or you feel the financial stress of from your parents because they're strapped in sending you to school, and you may not even realize that that's happening. And the same thing goes for relationships, and the same thing goes for your time, right? As a student athlete, when you don't feel like you have enough time, that's actually bootstrapping the capacity and the thinking space that you think you have available to devote to your sport. And so this framework, these 5 things integrate with each other in a way where it allows you to constantly reshape your perspective and audit. Like if you're sensing burnout, you have to dive into each of these 5 categories and audit for yourself where they're meeting or missing your expectations, right? And so one way I teach, visually, one way I teach that framework is through the lens of like, let's imagine you're your favorite DJ standing on a stage in front of 20,000 people, and that soundboard that's over there is in front of you, right? In order to make the sound come out of the soundboard, what do you have to do?
You hit the buttons.
You got to hit the buttons, move the sliders, spin the dials. And so very simply, if we take time, relationships, purpose, health, and finance, and we put one of those on a different slider, you're the DJ of your life, right? If you want the sound to continue to sound in a way that the crowd is like loving it, you need to love it, which means that you need to manipulate those sliders to meet your expectations, and you're responsible for knowing where they are relative to the set list that you're playing. And so, to a long-winded way to answer your question of burnout, it's like realize that burnout number 1, you are responsible for your burnout. Number 2, here's a simple framework for you to audit where you can dial up responsibility or take action in one of these 5 lanes.
So, what's next for you?
Hopefully a lot of things. I've been sandboxing a lot of projects in the last 20 months. 90% of my time is spent in the corporate wellness world now. Corporate wellness gets a bad rap because a lot of corporate wellness has been spun up into like big healthcare. And so you get like Horizon, Cignas of the world buying these corporate wellness apps and programs and stuff like that. And they're just saying, hey, get well. Right. And so I bring that up because I want to make sure that I contrast, like, that's not what I'm doing. I'm not trying to build another app that gets rolled up into Cigna. What we've been sandboxing and trying to materialize a product around is what we just talked about. Things like the 5 freedoms, mechanisms for measuring and understanding where individuals are relative to where they need to be and how we're going to close that gap. And so for the past 20 months, it's really been like boots on the ground, talking to as many people as I can, coaching as many people as I can. But it's moving in a direction of materializing tools and mechanisms to assist the coaches who are doing the engaging with the people that are essentially guiding them to reduce their health risk. And so if you have, I was talking to a woman earlier in the week who's over 350 pounds and she could barely move, right? And this individual is just one of many individuals in the corporate world. And there's a couple of things going on with this individual. First and foremost, the individual is living a life trapped that's has a collateral impact on the people that she lives her life with, has a collateral impact on the people that she works with and engages every day, and has a financial impact on the company because the company's paying for her to be over 350 pounds, right? And so my vision is, I believe, because we've done it time and time again, that by us coaching this woman, the downstream effect of that happening is that the company will experience a more alive human being, a healthier human being, a more productive human being, a human being that will probably stay with the company longer because the company invested in her with this thing that doesn't exist at other companies. And the company will experience cost reduction from an individual like that. And so my primary focus is literally on the individual, knowing that all these other, and the same thing the same kind of theme is paralleled for why I got into strength training. Like I didn't get into strength training to have 10 Olympic gold medalists or national champs. I got into it because I loved seeing the person accomplish the thing. And I knew that if I did that enough times, time and time again, you know, you'd get a John Paz and an Anthony Ashnall and all that kind of stuff.
That's the byproduct.
That's right. Yeah.
At the end of the line. So something that we do ask a lot of our guests, what you know now today, if you went back to yourself as a younger version, what would you tell yourself?
Don't open a gym. Easy question. Yeah, so I get asked this question often. That's why I was able to rattle it off. But yeah, don't open a gym. But there's kind of there's kind of an edge there, because if I didn't open the gym, I don't think I would have got to where I was. But the ignorance as a 22-year-old to just like let it rip and open a gym, I'm like, wow, like it could have been really bad,
right?
But also,
but you were 22, so there's a lot of time to kind of overcome that.
Sure. Yeah, there was so much uncertainty that I was ignorant to at that time, which was kind of, I guess, a superpower, right? Of starting a gym.
Sometimes it's what you don't know, you don't know.
That's right.
If the listeners wanted to connect with you to learn more about what you're doing, how can they reach out to you?
I'm pretty lively on Instagram. I try to be. I think my handle is Mike's_motives. The newsletter is one of the main kind of messaging streams that I want to stay consistent with. So I don't know if you guys can attach that to the show notes or something. But if you do sign up to the newsletter, the way I built out the first 30 emails in January is so that anyone that signs up new to the newsletter gets all 30 days in a row, regardless of when you sign up. I'm also sending 1 to 3 a week now that are like live time. But when you sign up for the newsletter, you're going to get this sequence that was built in January that Harry was talking about, in addition to the ones going forward. So,
and I did read all 30 of them, and I can tell you that they are worth reading. So if you do sign up for that alone, it's worth it.
Appreciate it.
I would say that for sure. Well, Mike, we do want to thank you for coming out here and being a guest on the show, and continued success with all the work that you're doing. And that's a wrap for episode 20 of Destination Talk with Paz and Harry. Until we see you again.